Hello, this is Miss Prater, and this is a help video for 1.13 unit test part 2. And I'm just going to talk briefly about each one of these problems, maybe give you some insight. On number 1, they are asking you to graph the function, so I would suggest that you start by figuring out what your A, your B, and your C are. Then from there, you need to figure out what your period is. And then remember, for the period, you've got to use your formula 2 pi over b. So for example, okay, for example, on this particular problem, we'll just do the A, the B, and the C. A is 1, B is 1, and C is -2. A is the number that's to the left of your sine or cosine. B is always the coefficient of x, and then C is always this outside number. The one thing I see students having the most trouble with is the period, okay? Because if you're graphing, then you need 5 points. So I'm just going to make something up really, really quick here. Let's say I have this other problem where A is 2, B is 2, C is 3. So then I'm going to find the period. That's going to be 2 pi over B. Or in this case, since B is 2, that's going to be 2 pi over 2. The 2's will reduce, and my period will be pi. So when I go to graph this, and we'll say this one is sine also. So when I go to graph this example, one of the things that you have to do is you have to realize what your period is. This is what most people miss. So my first point will be on my y-axis. My second point will be here. My third point will be here. My fourth point will be here. And my fifth point will be here. So I know I have to stretch out to pi. And then you need to label, you need to think about what the values of these other spots on the x-axis are going to be. So this would be half of pi. This would be 1/4 of pi. And this would be 3/4 of pi. You could change these into decimals by using the fact that 3.14 is the approximate value for pi. You are going to want to focus on your C value because that's going to tell you where your midline is. So on this problem, our midline is at 3. You don't have to draw that, but you definitely need to think about it. I would draw it. I would print this out, by the way, and draw these in. You can use Desmos to make sure that you know where you're going. My A value is 2, so that means I'm going to be going up 2. So my max will be at 5. I'm going to be going down 2, and my min will be at 1. Since this is sine, we're going to start on the midline. A is positive, so I'm going to reach my maximum before I reach my minimum. So I'll go up to there. That's at pi over 4. At pi over 2, I'll go back to the midline. At 3 pi over 4, I'll go to 1. And then at pi, I'll go back to the midline, and then you can sketch that graph in. I do want to see distinct points so I know that you understand the content. Okay, so that's my example for number 1. Number 2, pretty well, same thing. This one switches to cosine. So you're still going to want to do your A value, your B value, your C value. You're going to want to figure out what your period is. And then this one is cosine, so you know the graph's going to be a little bit different. So look back at anything that you've done with cosine if you're having trouble with that. All right, so number 1 and number 2 are similar. Number 3 is a word problem. It says a scientist recorded the movement of a pendulum for 10 seconds. The scientist began recording when the pendulum was at its resting position. The pendulum then moved right, which is a positive displacement, and then left, which is a negative displacement, several times. The pendulum took 4 seconds to swing to the right and the left, and then returned to its resting position. The pendulum furthest distance to either side was 6 inches. Graph the function that represents the pendulum's displacement as a function of time. So the x-axis is time, And then the f of x, or the y-axis, is, it's going to be, what are we measuring in? So just begin recording. The pendulum moved right. It's going to be movement. This axis is going to be movement. I think they're really giving you, I was looking for some type of unit. So just to give you some information, let's finish this. My bad, I got distracted. A says write an equation to represent the displacement of the pendulum as a function of time. So for the A part, you will have to figure out what the A, the B, and the C are. And then you'll have to figure out whether this is a sine graph or a cosine graph. And then you can plug those values in. Personally, if you've been to enough of my classes, you know that I would probably graph this first because the picture makes more sense to me. So you can do whatever you want. So I would just go through here and I would graph first. So I would do the B part first, and I would look at things like, it says the scientists began recording the pendulum at its resting position. So that's a clue that its resting position would be at the midline. I'll give you a few clues here. The pendulum then moved to the right. Okay, so that means on your graph, that's going up. Okay, so on the graph, right means up. So this would go to your max. This would be your max when you move to the right. And then to the left, which is negative replacement, this would be your min. The pendulum took 4 seconds to swing to the right and left, and then return to resting position. So that's a clue. So this 4 seconds, without giving this away, this whole process is happening in 4 seconds. So that 4 seconds is a really big clue of something that's important that's going to be in your equation. It says the pendulum's furthest distance to each side is 6 inches. That's what I was looking for here. This is not movement. This is inches. So this would be its maximum swing as far as its height, and that would be in inches. So that's really important. I would suggest that you sketch this out based on the word problem, and then you go through these steps. You are going to find the period. It's going to be in the wording, and then the period is going to give you that B value. Okay. I don't really want to work this one completely out or try to find something that's similar because, it's just a word problem. I'm not going to find something that's exactly the same and then let you just kind of